everybody, and welcome to the Risk Matrix with James Junkin.
The
and
Risk
myself,
Matrix, James
Dr.
Junkin
Martin.
in the house, roll tide.
James Junkin and Dr. Martin as the hosts, and today we got Mike Beam from East Carolina University on board. Mike, we're going to introduce you in a second, but first we're going to have a read from our sponsor for today. Today's episode of the Risk Matrix by Veriforce is sponsored by Mariner Gulf Consulting and Services. Occupational safety and health policies and procedures represent the foundation of a functioning and executable safety management system. Using a customized approach, Mariner Gulf's technical writing group works with your team to develop customized policies and procedures that meet regulatory standards, third-party verification requirements, industry best practices, and have withstood hundreds of hiring client audits and OSHA inspections. Get your customized and compliant programs today by visiting marinergulf.veriforcenetwork.com and receive up to 25% off your policies and procedures. All right, James. So today we have Dr. Michael Beam. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
Dr. Beam, you're in the Matrix, baby.
Dr. Beam's in the Matrix, baby. And
What that means, but I'll find out.
This was my idea. I know that you're a fan of prevention through design. You've done a bunch of work on it and writing. My co-host here, James, is also a big fan of prevention through design, as am I. So welcome to the Matrix. You're going to find out, and you'll never forget it. Tell us a little bit about what you do over there at East Carolina, how long you've been there, what you like to teach, what you don't like to teach, issues, anything you want to bring up, Mike.
Yeah, so thanks. So I've been here 19 years. I've been my 20th year here. And
Wow.
So I'm the graduate program director. We have a Master of Science program in occupational safety. It's like many programs, it's a generalist degree. We are ABET accredited. So we have a good, strong advisory board, and we like all programs, I think, like us, we go through our ups and downs. We struggle to get students. We're a state-funded institution. So
Yep.
The in-state rate is really attractive. The out-of-state rate is not so attractive. So, we ebb and flow with our students. But we have some pretty good students. Students come from a wide variety of backgrounds. The program is delivered both on campus and online. So that's I think we've been ABET accredited since 2014. And so I love the topic of prevention through design. I think it's something that I kind of started. I didn't know I was starting on that journey in my career, but I up and quit my job in 2001 and went to Oregon State University. Go Beavers, James. Not the Ducks. Please don't mistake and call me a duck, or I might have to come through the screen and. So go Beavers. But I met some great faculty there and got involved in prevention through design, and worked with NIOSH for a bit. Their prevention through design initiative helped to kick that off, and done some other things. So I'll be quiet.
No, that's great. That's fine. Go.
That's great. Go. Let me ask you this, because I am passionate about prevention through design, and this show is by Veriforce, which is a SaaS third-party verification platform. But I love their mission, and it aligns with the mission I think you have, Dr. Martin has, which is to get workers home safe from high-hazard jobs. And I'm just wondering, this is my question, in your journey, where did you start to begin to think about, hey, maybe we should try to control hazards in the design phase of the work rather than at the sharp end where the worker meets the hazard?
Well, that's a really good question. So when I do, my spiel, I get invited to speak about prevention through design quite a bit. And, you know, whenever you start the slide that says your journey, right, it's always kind of a failure. So, um, my journey. So I worked in the corporate office for a pretty large global corporation, and we had responsibilities in North America. And we had this bright idea back in the late 90s that, you know, and if you remember the 90s, then the 90s were great, right? We
I
were
was
building,
in the Navy. I remember part of the 90s.
oh my gosh, it was great. We were building new facilities, we were expanding things. There was this thing called bonuses. It was great. The 90s were good. And so we had this bright idea that said, maybe it was me, I don't know. And it's like, oh, well, instead of going out, you know, when the facility first starts up, we should go out like a month before. And we'll do what safety people do. We'll come in and tell you what's wrong, and like a good corporate person, well, we'll see you. Hello, I'm from corporate. I'm here to help, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we had this brilliant idea. So I go out to this brand new facility, beautiful facility, and I do my 2-day walk around with the operators, the maintenance people, and I do the closing with this brand new plant manager. He had been there about a week. Startup's going to happen in about 3 weeks. I have this list of like 25, 30 things that have to be fixed. Things like, well, you know, the maintenance people have to go up on this catwalk, and they can't reach where they have to go to the pipes and the valves and the things. And so we're going to have to extend the catwalk, or we're going to have to move design types of things, right? And so he goes, so what you're telling me is your corporation built me a brand new facility, and now you're telling me I have 25 things that I have to fix.
And they're expensive.
And I thought, this guy has a point. And thus my journey, my journey in safety through design started at that moment, because I'm like, well, guess what? We didn't start early enough. And then, you know, the famous chart that all of us in this prevention safety through design field use was this chart where, you know, it's like the ability to influence safety, right? You know, this sweeping, you know, chart that comes in with the design up here. There's your highest ability, and it exponentially decreases down to startup, right? So that chart was developed by a pulp and paper engineer who was building pulp and paper facilities, and he had the same bright idea that I had. I'm like, he's like, well, geez, all the pulp and paper mills are basically the same. If we build a new one, we know all the things that we've done wrong. We know the situations that people are getting themselves into. We can change things. And so this guy Roman Zimbersky had this article, this little article in a trade journal, and we use that chart all the time. It's simply the ability to influence cost and over the life cycle of a project. And he put in the word safety, and the same thing holds true. And so that was kind of my journey. It didn't start very well. And then I got into academia, and research, James and Linda. And I'm not sure it's gotten any better, but that's my journey. Well, and then I met this guy, John Gambatese, out of Oregon State, and he was really interested in this topic, and he had a little research grant from the Center to Protect Workers' Rights, CPWR, which you may be familiar with. So we worked with them on some things around design, and Anthony Veltri in the public health department. He actually, he had a course for a long time, since the early 90s, on safety through design. And so I got to meet those two guys, and
And here you are, right? So I 20 years later, okay, well, actually 30 years later, if we're talking about the 90s, right? Where are we now? Okay. Have we gone anywhere in the last 20 years, or are we at the same kind of theoretical concepts that you were developing in the early 2000s? Because that's my concern there, is that, you know,
Yeah.
we talk a big game, okay, but what are we doing to change things? What are we doing for new ideas, new implementation factors?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And that's the crux of it, I think, too, is that, you know, we, unlike other countries, the US, we don't have regulations that require, you know, like the UK construction design and management, Australia has them from the European directive, they have them. New Zealand recently has some, Singapore. You know, they require, you know,
Right.
the owner of the facility, of a new facility, of an expansion, of a refurb, of a refurb, a project, they require the owner to take some responsibility in the design phase early on. And then also, of course, the architects, the engineers, the construction folks, they all have this. So they're thinking and starting earlier than we are. And I think, I forget who, gosh, I forget which one said, but, you know, waiting until the sharp end, James. I think you said that's a really good quote. I think, you know, we do wait till the sharp end, and then, well, then it's too late. And I think Linda said, you know, it's expensive, right?
Yep.
So this is, I think this is the problem. But I think there are a lot. There's some organizations out there, some owners who are seeing the benefit of this. But I think, you know, like anything too, when an owner does this and see the benefit, you know, in the private sector, you know, maybe you don't want to tell too many people. You know, you don't want some academic coming in and writing research papers and telling everybody what kind of what you're doing here to make things better. But I do hear, you know, about some owners, some large owners of the built environment doing those kind of particular things. But I think it's, so yeah, I'm not too pessimistic, but yeah.
Sort of.
Well, do you think that this plateauing of fatalities, the fatality rate, is directly related to the inability to incorporate prevention through design and safety through design? And is that the key for us to bend that fatality trend? Because if you look at what we've done over the past 20, 30 years, we have a steady decline in workplace injuries, OSHA recordable injuries, but we have not seen that same decline. In fact, we've seen it plateaued and tick upwards coming out of COVID.
Well, I mean, I don't think anything is a panacea, right? I think, you know, it's so multifactorial. There's so many things that influence the eventual site safety. You know, there was an author, Joe Stevenson, wrote a book in 1991 called System Safety 2000. And one of the first things he wrote is that the safety of any operation is determined long before the people, procedures, and processes come together at the work site. And I love that quote. I think, but it's not a panacea, though. I think, you know, right, you always have, right, I'm of the ilk that safety is an emergent property of a very complex socio-technical system. So whenever you have humans coming in to the built environment, it's always going to be very dynamic and very complex. You can't plan and design for everything, but I think we could, right? So most behavior happens at that subconscious level, right? It's not this, oh, I'm going to systematically do these things. We'd like to think that stuff happens, but in reality, it's very, very subconscious. It's very reactionary, right? And so we need to give people that better opportunity to build, operate, maintain the built environment. You know, housing is a perfect example, right? I mean, you know, you see all this residential construction going up. You can drive through these new neighborhoods, and, right, you can stand at the side and go, oh, they don't have fall protection. Well, geez, well, no kidding. Well, where are you going to tie off to? How you going to, you know, so there's a whole bunch of, there's a whole host of problems, right? Or issues. I don't want to say problems, but issues that, you know, we haven't really planned and thought out
Right.
work in this complex socio-technical system. And I think, you know, Fred Manuel,
My guy.
That's your guy.
okay.
I love Fred Manuel.
You're a Fred Manuel guy. Yeah, you know what, Fred, I wrote an article in Professional Safety way back when, and Fred called me on my landline, and that's how I met Fred. We've become friends, and I really like him. What was I going to say about Fred? Oh, yeah, he has a term that he uses called error provocative.
That was going to be my question.
Oh, I know. Boy, James, you and I need to talk more. We'll go.
Yeah,
we'll go ahead. I forget where I was going.
So, can you truly design out the error provocative? Like,
I mean, I think there are cases, right? So I've unfortunately, a lot of my really good examples come from outside the U.S. So I've done some work in Australia. I did a fellowship in Singapore where I looked at, of all things, green roofs and green walls and urban greenery systems.
Cool stuff.
That was that was really cool. That was fascinating, and so I'll never forget this. So I'll try to answer your question in a long way, maybe as a good academic does, I guess.
Yep,
But so Donna Heidel was in charge of the Prevention Through Design initiative from NIOSH way back when in 2007. And I remember getting a phone call from her. She was probably on a landline. No, I'm just kidding. She called me. No, she called me.
People are listening to this, Mike, and they're saying, "What's a landline?"
What's a landline? I know,
Yeah.
I know.
Something connected to the wall.
Boy, we're talking about the 90s and landlines. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So error provocative.
Yeah. So error provocative was a question. So she calls me and she says, Mike, I'm standing here in Boston. She was in Boston, Linda. And I'm looking, and these landscapers are hoisting up a lawnmower onto the 10th floor, onto the roof of a 10-story building. And they're just hanging over the edge. And the lawnmower's on this little rope. And I said, oh my gosh, what? And she goes, well, they must be mowing the roof. I'm like, oh my gosh, green roofs. And so, you know, I think that's an example, you know, okay, so we put stuff on the roof, right? And whatever it happens to be, right? Skylights are the classic. I mean, there's no way in 2023 we should have any fall through skylight fatalities. There's no way. It's just an abomination, quite frankly, that we have still, and we just wrote a paper on this too. I think there's about 40 or 50, at least that's documented, fatalities of just falling through fragile skylights every year.
Yep.
And so those are the types of things, James and Linda, that I think are predictable. And I think once you start thinking about things that are predictable, if you can make those particular changes, your error provocative situations, you start to understand them a little bit better, right? Because it's easy to say kind of after the fact, which safety professionals are great at hindsight, right? We're all kind of Captain Hindsights. and you know, we're great at saying, oh yeah, well, if. Well, let's start really trying to predict things, right? So here's the other thing I want to say too, the essence of the safety and health function, right? So when I ask people, what do safety professionals do? Oh, yes, trying to get at a higher level here. Oh, so you're probably really good at identifying hazards, right? So if you look at what we do is identify, evaluate, and control, or something like that.
Right.
But the first word in all of those functions is anticipate. Identify, evaluate, and control. We're terrible at anticipating things. Terrible.
I'm going to jump in there and say, I think we're terrible at anticipating things, but I don't think we work hard enough. to anticipate things, right? It's very lazy of us to kind of go into a situation. I mean, and this, I think a lot of people see safety professionals as this, like, we have the job and we're out there just identifying and walking around and doing whatever. But we should be spending more time looking at things critically beforehand, either in the design phase or in those audit phases too, right? And James does a lot of audits, right? So, yes, you are identifying in an audit, but you should also be anticipating. And I dare say that James probably does that when he audits, right? He's like saying, well, there's not a problem now, or, you're building this thing for your facility. Perhaps you should think about XYZ, right? I'm a pessimist. I'm a glass half empty or whatever pessimist is, right? Like, it's leaking, the glass is leaking. And I think we're just, in general, there's a percentage of us that just don't anticipate. We don't even include that in our thinkings. And why, I don't know, because we get it in our academic training, right? We get the anticipation. But yet it goes out the window. Is it because we're too busy? Is it because, I mean, I'm saying lazy, right? Because I think, maybe that's not the term. We're too busy. We're lazy. We haven't been mentored well enough. I mean, what do you think it is?
I don't think we get invited to the right meetings.
Okay. I'll go with that.
I think in general, the safety function doesn't get invited to the strategic meetings. They get invited to the tactical meetings, but not the strategic meetings.
Okay.
So I would put that.
I would agree with that. But I have worked for companies where they invite you to the meetings and then they just don't listen.
Well,
right.
So
I've been kind of a potato in a chair, and I try to speak up, and people, they don't want to hear it. They want to hear about, is it the right valve, but not if it's the safest valve. Right.
So, yeah. And I think we also have a communication problem too, a lot of times, in the way we speak. And I'm not saying you, but I'm just saying you, the plural, the plural you, the plural us,
yeah.
right? Safety professionals, we tend to go to what we know, right? 29 CFR 1910, blah, 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 blah. And nobody wants to hear that. Nobody cares about how high to hang the fire extinguisher. Nobody cares that we know that, right? So we want to be, talking more about work and how to make work safer, healthier, more productive, easier. Then we want to talk about safety. Safety naturally comes along when you talk about making work less difficult, right? When you talk about well-being, when you talk about a more seamless production effort, safety comes along with that. So you don't have to talk about safety. I think that's kind of the language that, that safety professionals get kind of caught into. So actually, I run a course here at the university. I run it every other summer on safety through design, and my graduate students take it, and we try to get them to think about these things. But naturally, they want to talk about safety committees, and I'm like, I don't care about a safety committee. Who cares? That's
who cares about the safety committee? I hate to say that, but
I mean, but not when we're talking about design,
right?
The design and planning of X products, processes of work. Yes. So who cares about a safety committee, right? Let's shift our thinking. Let's shift our language. I think we struggle with that, right?
I would agree with that. My experience in two very high hazard industries, oil and gas industry and construction industry, particularly in chemical processing plants, right? A lot of times when we're the planning of the work itself, the safety consideration doesn't really come into play until we get to the last line in what should be a long line of hazard and risk assessments and identification and controls and all these other tools that we got till we get to the JSA. And in my opinion, it's too late. By the time we get to the JHA, the JSA, that should not be the first time we start thinking about hazards, because by the time we get to there, we've lost any opportunity in the design of the work itself, We've lost any opportunity to think about predictable human actions, that human beings can make mistakes. And we probably do not have adequate barriers and defenses that if they fail, they can fail safely. And really what we're left down to is, do we have the right PPE?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, that's kind of the fundamental shift. I think, when people come at safety from different disciplines, all this stuff makes sense to them. But when you come at safety, I think sometimes there's a phrase, what's cognitive dissonance, right? We're safety professionals are they become too much. I think there's something as too much safety expertise.
Yeah.
And we really need to look at this as work. It's a very transdisciplinary thing. And sometimes we're in that kind of tunnel vision of safety. We can't break out of it. So I think, to really anticipate things, right? It's getting others involved. It's safety professionals need to become better listeners rather than quoting whatever 1910 happens
1910, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to become better listeners. There's a good book. I want to plug a book. The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. This is a really good book. You kind of can see the front cover here. It's a funny picture of a teapot with the handle on the wrong way, right? And so Don is you should really kind of learn from Don, I think, about design, and he has a great book. I'm reading it right now. I forget what it's called, but it's a great book. But we use this book in our class, and Don has a whole chapter, human error, ? No bad design. And he has a whole, and I love reading it. It's about a 50-page chapter on errors, and he's worked with James Reason. So he has a great perspective from this, looking at things from a design lens, and it's just a really, really great book. And
I think you just sold 2 books for him. If James doesn't, James was an avid reader. He probably's already read it, but I'm gonna get it because I love that kind of stuff.
he has a new book. Something about human-centered something or other.
Design. Yeah.
Something sustain. I forget.
Mike, let me ask you this. When we start talking about what is a safety profession, that's everybody from folks that are just getting started, that maybe not have the academic background or credentials or degree, field experience type safety professionals, all the way up to you two, experts in your field with PhDs. What do you say to those beginning safety professionals about where they can go and what they should do to begin to implement safety by design within their organizations?
Talk to the people who are doing the work and
Yes,
listen. You have my mother always said you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. But I think, you need 3 or 4 for 5 ears, because you really need, I think for anybody starting out, it's interesting. Students say to me, well, I've worked in construction my whole life, but I really want to get into healthcare. I don't have I'm like, well, so what? Your construction experience, now you have the safety experience, and wow. So, what do I do? Talk to people who are doing the work. Ask them questions. The best question you could ask is, what makes your work difficult? How would you change it? Just listen. Just listen and keep following up and listening to people, talk with people. We do this, students do an interview. They ask a worker, and I'm always kind of doing this stuff too. I was on a flight, and the flight attendant asked me, I don't know why. I guess because I was in the aisle and I looked like I was gullible enough to do it. But she asked me to push up the overhead
bag.
bin
Red.
stuff, the overhead bins. I said sure. And then I said to her, I said so. Yeah, I said, this is what I do, and I'm interested in design. And I said, well, how would you design this differently? And she said, well, I would, I wish I was taller. And I wish I was stronger. I said, well, yeah. She goes, well, I would have like a different, kind of like a stick or something that I could grab on and just poof, just lift them. And I wouldn't have to stretch so much. And so I think just talking with workers, they'll have some interesting ideas as well too. And you got to get away from this whole, we need more training, we need more procedures. You have to get away from that stuff. How would you really change your job, right? Like what would you do? What tools do you need differently? How would you organize the way product flows from A to B to C, right? I mean, that's product flow is about design. So I think that ability to be a humble inquirer, I'll use that term, another great book.
Yep, love it. Humble inquiry.
I love that book. And I think, just being an empathetic listener is a great way to get involved in anticipation and planning and design.
I'm pretty sure James's grandmother or mother said that to him too, about you have two ears and one mouth, right? My grandmother said it to me. My mom says it to me still. And I'm going to tag right on that. Like, I think being inquisitive, being a lifelong learner, being humble, which I think a lot of people have a hard time doing when they think they're the quote unquote expert, right? You come in with that safety lens and you're really not, your concern for people has to be with the people, and asking them questions about what they do is 100% where it starts, right? My kids tell me, we go to the grocery store and I'm talking to everybody and I said, Mom, not everything has to be a conversation. And I'm like, it kind of does, right? Because I want to learn about people. I mean, I'm not learning about everybody's work, all the time, but I'm learning about people and I'm being inquisitive. And so I think that's great advice. How do we get there, right? Because a lot of students come in, and I see this, you probably see it too. Students come in and they learn all these technical things, and they blah blah blah, 1910, 120, blah 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 blah. Confined spaces, this. Here are the definitions. But they're not learning the communication skills. How do you foster that as it is kind of courses that you're giving, right?
Well, you give them, I think you just give them assignments and you force them to get out and talk with workers, job shadow. And I think you really have to coach students as well too, because like you said, oh, you're a student. Well, I need to bring something to the table. Well, no. You don't have to immediately come up with solving the world's problems. But you need to be a better information gatherer so you can define the problem, right? Albert Einstein said something like, if you give me an hour to solve a problem, I'm going to spend the first 55 minutes defining the problem, right? So many times we're speaking and spouting this and that, and we don't even know what the problem is. So we need to listen. And so I think giving students, and I think coaching them too on just one or two questions to ask, right? What makes your work difficult? What would you do differently? Right? And then take that information and then go back and see if the OSHA says something, or see if there's a procedure, or see if there's a best practice in this industry, best practice, or talk with other people, right? So I think we need to put students in position to be better at information gathers.
Yeah. So I'm gonna tag on that once more, and then I'm gonna let James talk, because I can see he probably has like 65 questions in his mind. I get a lot of students that come in and we give them these assignments, right? And they go, I don't know, I've never been a safety professional. And my response is always, have you worked? And they go, well, yeah. And I'm like, well, where have you worked? And they go, well, I've worked in a factory. And I'm like, okay. So that's a place to start, right? You don't have to be a safety professional to think with that lens, or think partially that lens. You've done the work, right? So talk about the work that you've done and how you would make it better.
See, I will add that. Now, I don't want to add that. We'll let James jump in. But I think everybody's a safety professional. Yes. Everybody. Right. I mean, I've lived 29 years. No. But I exactly. We're also Don Norman. He says everyone is a designer, right? What did you do this morning, right? So how would you design your day, right? You made sure there was a clean towel. You made your coffee. You walk. I made my coffee while I'm going, and I got a shower. I designed something, right? So we're all designers. I think we're all safety professionals. And again, I think sometimes that kind of business that you where you think you have all this expertise. You gotta kind of shift back a little bit. And that people always say, because of politics, I mean, be humble and let that go. If there's those things, against for other professions, there's those things that you can help professions, you'll just fine. And I'm almost, I mean, I've said to James, I certainly like to tell, right? I like to learn. But I think things that have served me the best when I'm in a field or in a position where I'm a director is and I hate to call myself, because I that term gets so overused, but the speaking and the listening and communicating and the caring, right? I mean, because you can always flip something out. You can always phone a friend. You can always gather a bunch of people together and do something around. But you can't get to the crux of the matter if you don't ask questions and you don't listen. Here's a great this is a great story, and I tell my students this one all the time. So back to my first job out of college, again, right? You think you know everything. 22, 23, think you know everything. Well, my boss got fired. And there's a whole bunch of reorganization. Just human resource director, and we're all kind of that. All people who were in the facility. We didn't see her for like a whole month. She was out on the floor. She was on the night shift. She was in the weekend. She was working with people. She worked with people throughout the whole facility. All silently, sarcastically. Oh, what's she doing? Yeah. We were very arrogant, right? Yeah. After I've been there about 2.5 years. After 30 days, she knew more about that facility. Anybody knew. Right. Even after 30 years, she knew what was going on in the mixing. She knew she knew people. And she would come to me and say, well, did you know that, Linda and James are having problems down at this end because there's the ventilator. I'm like, no. She's like, and I'm like, well, because I'm too arrogant, I'm too busy sitting in my office thinking, no, I know everything. That was a great life lesson. I didn't realize it at that moment. It took me, I know, a couple of months for it to kind of, churn and sink in. But that was a very professional, changing moment.
Defining moment.
Yeah, like, she went out there, she got dirty, she knows people's names, she was working with people, she knows the issues, the problems, she knows the good, the bad.
She's thinking.
She was asking, she was curious, she was a humble inquirer, she was, and I think that is what you need to be. That is what safety professionals need to be.
Cool. James, you got one more question for him? I'm sorry.
I got a final question.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm talking too much.
No, it's great.
Oh, no, it's me and you
Great.
talking too much.
Great. So, Veriforce is an international organization with operations in Africa, South Africa, in Canada, in the EU. And you mentioned that in some of those markets, those international markets, there are standards, there are regulations, there are rules in place about design. And we may not have that here in the U.S. What can U.S. operations learn from their international counterparts that can help control and identify and assess hazards in the design phase and hopefully bring workers home safe?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, in the U.S., safety through design is going to be driven by owners and people who finance projects. And so, if you're building a new addition to your facility or you're refurbishing stuff, that's the point to get involved. In terms of learning, I think that, if you can, so what I've learned the most from is just by benchmarking from other people's facilities, right? So things that they've done, and can we translate, from Denmark to the U.S. or something like that? So, do those kind of same processes kind of work? But I think too, it's just simply, again, James, I think it's just about being kind of humble in terms of the approach to saying, well, just because we built it this way in the past doesn't mean we need to kind of build it, operate and maintain it this way in the future. What have we learned? So when I was in Oregon, so the Intel facility out there, this is the early 2000s, they were building a very similar plant in Beaverton, Oregon than they had in Chandler, Arizona. They brought up the contractors, the maintenance people, the contractors who built the Chandler facility, they brought up operators and maintenance people from that facility to help them design it better, because they knew, things aren't perfect. So let's get that worker input into the design. And that was a pretty cool project. So I think, trying to benchmark, trying to learn from folks in similar facilities and similar operations is always a good thing.
Well, thank you, sir, for your time. It's been certainly informative and enlightening. And, we share your passion for trying to analyze, anticipate hazards in the design phase of the work. I think that's key in helping bend the serious injury and fatality trend that we seem to be experiencing. But thank you for what you do individually for the profession, and most especially for that worker out there that comes to work to do a good job to support their families.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thanks, Michael, for coming on. And you guys have been listening to the Risk Matrix with James Junkin, Dr. Martin, and Dr. Michael Beam from East Carolina University. So thanks for being with us for another episode of the Risk Matrix.